Jack wasn't having any of it. So let's just get straight into it. And like I said, I want to catch up on some of these headlines because there's been some big stuff happening in the middle of the World Series. And it starts with the Bryce Harper drama in Philly. And I've seen a lot of people talk about it. And what they're doing is they're pulling one short quote. And I get it. You want to spend most of the show giving your opinion. But unfortunately, I feel like that leaves a lot of context out. I know the thing that people hate the most is pulling a quote without context and then having people react to that. So, what we're going to do, bear with me here, folks. I'm going to read you the quotes from Dave Dombrowski because I feel like when you read it all, it creates a different picture than something that's being currently painted in the media. So, we'll start from an article on The Athletic, and I quote, "Of course, he's still a quality player," Dombrowski said. "He's still an all-star caliber player. He didn't have an elite season like he had had in the past. And I guess we only find out if he becomes elite or if he continues to be good. I look around the league. Freddie Freeman, he's a really good player, right? He still is a good player. Is he elite like he was before? Probably not to the same extent. Freddie's a tremendous player, and that to me is Bryce. Can he rise to the next level again? I don't really know that answer." And we continue. "Really, he's the one who will dictate that more than anything else. That's what it comes down to. So I don't think he's content with the year that he's had. And again, it wasn't a bad year. But when I think of Bryce Harper, you're thinking elite, right? You're thinking of one of the top 10 players in baseball. And I don't think it fit into that category. But again, a very good player. I have no idea. I've seen guys at his age, and again, he's not old, that level off. Or I've seen guys rise again. We'll see what happens." So when I listen to that personally, that's the most fair assessment of Bryce Harper I've ever heard. Now, you're coming off a tough end to the season. Bryce Harper didn't have the greatest postseason run. So I'm sure anything that isn't super positive is going to hurt him a little bit. We'll talk about his answers in a second, and then we'll move to what Scott Boras, his agent, said as well. But when I read the entirety of the quote, I'm left thinking to myself, did it absolutely need to be said? Probably not. Was everything he said fair? In my opinion, yes.
So there is so much to unpack here. Let's start with the why. I agree with you entirely that Dave Dombrowski's representation of Bryce Harper's most recent season was exceedingly accurate because every word that he said was inarguable. Bryce Harper, a 129 OPS plus this season, his lowest mark in a season since 2014. Bryce Harper was a player trending towards being inarguably a top 100 player in the history of baseball, maybe even top 50. A person that a Phillies fan like myself believes that will someday go in on the first ballot with a Phillies hat on his plaque. And he had been so legendarily good in the postseason through last year, really, that it was somewhat surprising to us all when Bryce Harper this year played at a fairly ordinary level and did not pick up his game in that 4 game loss to the Dodgers. But let's come back to this. Why? I've been in the national media too long to take things that people say at face value. Ask yourself the question, why did Dave Dombrowski feel it necessary to say these things aloud? I don't believe for a second, Peter, that it was unintentional. This was an exceedingly intentional decision made by the president of baseball operations in Philadelphia. And why would he want to do it? Well, he did it, well, in my judgment at least, was because he wants to light a fire underneath Bryce Harper, and he knows full well the kind of person, the kind of player that Bryce Harper is. This is the most effective way with which to do it. I don't believe for a second that Dave Dombrowski wants to trade Bryce Harper, as so many have now pontificated. I'm not even sure if he was prepared for the firestorm that was set to ensue on Philadelphia Sports Talk Radio as a direct result. But Dave Dombrowski is going to be an executive that someday goes to the Hall of Fame and joins people like Pat Gillick and Theo Epstein and other legendary team architects, a person who's had success in Montreal and Miami and Boston and Detroit. This was intentional. He very much used this platform to say things publicly that he previously would have privately. And he did so, in my judgment at least, to set a fire under Bryce Harper. And Bryce Harper next season is going to have a 900 plus OPS because of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I actually think this was the best medicine for Bryce Harper because he didn't say anything bad. Nothing was damning. He still gave him his flowers. He just said some players the aging curve starts to get a little bit more aggressive, and some guys continue to play at an elite level. Bryce Harper can absolutely do that. This wasn't his best season. But so I agree with you fully. Bryce Harper's reaction, little sensitive. I'm going to say it out loud. I thought it was a little sensitive. Let me read you the quote. It's disappointing to hear me being questioned about my contribution to the team. Just really hurt by that notion because I love Philly so much. I have given my all to Philly from the start, Harper told The Athletic on Saturday. Now there is trade talk. I made every effort to avoid this. It's all I heard in DC with the Nationals. I hated it. It makes me very uncomfortable. I'm also going to read you another Dave Dombrowski quote after. Again, you're in a spot, just finished the season, didn't end the way that you wanted to, especially for a competitor like Bryce Harper. So maybe every word hurts a little bit more. And I think what has resulted from the Dombrowski trade, or from the Dombrowski quotes, is rumors, trade rumors. But I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that's fair to Bryce Harper, but at the same time, a little bit sensitive. What are your thoughts?
I think that sensitive is a good word to describe it, but I also do appreciate that Bryce Harper is allowing us to see beyond the facade. I mean, he is a human being. He's a sensitive, vulnerable person, and he's allowing us to see that side of him. I think everyone in this case is doing the right thing. Dave Dombrowski, the outstanding general manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, intentionally saying things aloud to light a fire under the player. Scott Boras, as we also discovered in quotes that you may also have, defending his client while Bryce Harper is saying what he actually thinks into a microphone. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. This is not a situation for which any of us need to take a side. These are professionals at the peak of their powers, at the very top of their professions, communicating with the public the way that they think and feel about a situation. And this is an objective good. The tension between these two parties, to me, is an overwhelmingly positive thing. But I will say, in relation to Bryce Harper's comments, and the trade piece of it is, the Phillies are not exploring a trade for you, Bryce. That is the cesspool that is Philadelphia sports talk radio and the like. And those people that are peddling these ideas are the same people that, if they came across you in a street, would bow down prostrate and ask for an autograph and a picture. Like, you are a superhero in our city, and one of the most beloved athletes we have ever had. And take it from someone who has been rooting for Philadelphia teams for 25 years. His approval rating is really, really high. You're not going to be traded. Your 13-year, $330 million contract was structured in such a way that this would not be a thing. But we can't control what people are saying over the airwaves. What we can control is ensuring that our OPS next year is an 844. What we can control is ensuring that every single fan knows how badly you want to be there. That's what's most important. And I think Bryce Harper is going to come out next year with his hair on fire, in part because he knows he's better than this too. There's also sort of interpersonal elements to this too, my friend. And this is a 33-year-old person who just had his fourth child during the postseason. As he ages, what you have to do, the all-time greats are able to stave off that aging curve. Freddie Freeman's a perfect example. Freddie Freeman was a World Series hero last year. There's nothing stopping Bryce Harper from being that in the future. But Bryce Harper didn't put the kind of season and postseason together that you would say afterwards he played to his 100th percentile outcome. You simply would not. So sometimes this kind of tension is exactly what we need. Everyone here is saying reciting the lines that they should, and in the end, if Bryce Harper plays better as a result, it can only be good things that go from here.
And Dave Dombrowski just emphasized that point you just made. And I quote, "This thing's got a life of its own," Dombrowski said during an appearance this week on Foul Territory, Our Friends. Now I've been reading that. Oh, the Phillies may trade Bryce Harper. That couldn't be further from the truth. We love him. We think he's a great player. He's a very important part of our team. I've seen him have better years. I look for him to have better years. So as soon as Dombrowski was asked about those rumors, immediately shut it down, knows Harper can have better years, and is just saying, let's see it. That should light the fire under Bryce Harper. Understand, Dombrowski was not pushing you towards any sort of rumor mill. All he was saying was this wasn't his best season. He can be better, and I think that's the main point here.
Absolutely. And the Phillies would be foolish to trade Bryce Harper. It's 6 years and about $150 million left on the contract that will cover his ages 33 through 38 seasons. You and I both know that in a hypothetical world in which Bryce Harper was a free agent this offseason at 33, He's doing a lot better than 6 years and $150 million. The only way in which the Phillies would look to trade Bryce Harper would be if he decides he wants to go. Bryce has made it exceedingly clear that he does not. The Phillies have made it exceedingly clear that he does not. And Scott Boras has chimed in and said so as well. This is a performance issue. This is not, we don't want the player on our team. This is, we don't want this 3-WAR player on our team. We want this 5-WAR player on our team because that is the talent that we believe Bryce Harper to be. Look, he's too young to have started this aging curve. Bryce Harper is too young. The swing too explosive. The eye too shrewd. For him to be a 3-WAR, 840 OPS player, he's better than that, and we all know that. I'd love to think that his age 32 season, the one in which the Phillies just finished, is going to be his worst one in a while. And let's face it, when this team was obliterating people in the postseason, it was on the back of Bryce Harper and the back of this lineup. The Phillies have become a pitching-centric team, and ultimately, their lineup, and Bryce Harper being in the middle of it, has been an enormous reason why the Phillies have not advanced in the postseason, and he knows that as well as I do. I look forward to this fan base giving him a standing ovation on opening day, and I look forward to Bryce Harper's fourth-place MVP finish next year with a 920 OPS.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into something that you said about market value. If he became a free agent this season at 33 years old, coming off an 844 OPS with 27 home runs, wasn't the best season, clearly, and you've already broken it down in terms of OPS plus back in 2014. That was the lowest since. But an 844 OPS at 27 home runs is still pretty good. But I'm also thinking to myself at 33 to age 39, is he really still worth 6 years, 150 million? Because you said he would be worth more. I'm wondering why.
I think the primary reason he'd be worth more than that is because, first of all, if you're going to sign him as a free agent, you're not going to put him at first base. For the Phillies, he was most valuable on this team the last couple of years in the wake of the Rhys Hoskins injury and Nick Castellanos playing right field to play first base. But from a positional value standpoint, Bryce Harper would sign as a free agent elsewhere and very likely play right field and do so at a league average level. So you're not going to throw him at first base or DH him and suppress his WAR value in that sense. The other thing that you're going to do is look to all the peripherals, which indicate that Bryce Harper is still a 90th percentile bat, at least. I don't think there's any question that if Bryce Harper were a free agent right now, he'd be looking at a $200 million contract. Now, would he have gotten the kind of mega deal that you might expect Kyle Tucker to get this offseason? No, because he, of course, is on the wrong side of 30. It's pretty old 33, too, considering how early he debuted. We're talking about more than 1,700 games. And as you well know, the way that teams now model this stuff, they're not paying for, corner infield production, especially corner infield production when the bat is by far the most important thing. See Rafael Devers. They prefer a confluence of skill. Bryce Harper really doesn't provide that anymore. But you're not looking at his most recent season as being the baseline moving forward. You're looking at the body of work. And the body of work suggests that he's still a first ballot Hall of Famer. And so if we were to game this thing out, I think we're talking about a 7 or 8 year contract in excess of $200 million. You're going to see him make money in that sense. Think about like a Bo Bichette, who I think is going to get like a Dansby Swanson-esque or maybe even Xander Bogaerts-esque contract this offseason. That is the kind of deal Bryce Harper would get, which is to say he's worth more to the Phillies than they would be able to get from anyone else. We've seen the Yankees and the online rumor mill, circle as to whether or not a Ben Rice for Bryce Harper swap could be in the offing, and things like that are just too complicated. There are too many hurdles to overcome for such a thing to happen. I think the Phillies actually have Bryce still on a market value contract, if not more team friendly than that. Which is to say, the only reason you would trade him is if he wants to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I would pay him 6 years, 150 million on the open market, and probably more, considering how the contracts are at this point. Like you're talking about a Dansby Swanson's deal, he got paid $170 million. Xander Bogaerts, obviously younger, and that is a very important part of the contracts that are being given out. That's why Bo Bichette expects to get over $200 million, but Xander Bogaerts $280 million. So if you're not thinking Bryce Harper is worth that, I don't know what to tell you. The reason I asked is I just wanted you to dive in a little bit further. And Scott Boras, his agent, uttered the same sentiment. And I quote, "I don't think Dave Dombrowski or John Middleton or anybody is contemplating Bryce Harper not being a Philly for the rest of his career. Remember, there's only 10 qualified hitters that had a 355 OBP and a 485 slug this year. Bryce Harper, Ohtani, Schwarber, Soto, Cal Raleigh, Aaron Judge, Jose Ramirez, Freddie Freeman, George Springer, and Ketel Marte. If you want to talk about Harper's minimums due to injury, there they are. And that comes to us from the ballsoutofhere.com. It's a quote from their article. Couldn't agree with it more. And that's kind of a mic drop stat.
Oh, it most definitely is. And there's one other number that Scott Boras has been referencing ad nauseum, both publicly and privately from people with whom I've spoken. And that number is 44%, which is the amount of in-zone pitches Bryce Harper saw this past season. And it is a number that Scott Boras continues to come back to. And I think he's doing so because he believes that Bryce Harper is providing protection that he's not himself receiving. So Bryce Harper, look, on average, like we're just going to look at the qualifiers among hitters across baseball this past season. You're going to see a pitch in the strike zone about 50% of the time. 50.5 is the exact figure. Bryce Harper's figure of 43.5% is the lowest among qualified hitters. Behind him immediately, we're talking O'Neal Cruz, we're talking Diaz, we're talking Altuve, we're talking Castellanos. We're talking about much lesser than hitters who are not seeing pitches to hit, mostly because they're very swingy, they're very chasey.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper is not that, at least not when he gets to two strikes. But Bryce Harper consistently sees fewer pitches in the strike zone than any hitter in Major League Baseball. Scott Boras believes, I can say this on somewhat firm ground, that Bryce Harper's suppressed numbers this past season are in large part because there's no obvious reason to pitch to him. The Phillies cleanup hitter is some combination of Alec Boehm and a partridge in a pear tree. And you and I both know that Bryce Harper is not going to see an attractive profile of pitches, regardless of what you think about lineup protection, unless there's someone hitting behind him with some modicum of threat. And the Phillies have not had that. So Bryce Harper, in some sense, I think in the mind of Scott Boras, is credited for the extraordinary season that Kyle Schwarber just had, while at the same time, he's often coming to the plate with nobody on because Kyle Schwarber just cleaned the sacks. And I'm not going to give Bryce Harper a pitch to hit down the middle of the plate because there's no obvious reason to. And so that 43.5 is a huge number to keep circled as you look forward with Bryce Harper because it's a number that demonstrates that he's still the most feared hitter, in all of baseball. It's obviously a number that goes a long way in why the numbers weren't better this season, considering the profile of pitches he sees is so unappetizing.
You're totally right. And so is Scott Boras. Scott Boras is going to defend his players at every turn. He's going to try and get the most money for his players and bring his stats and, analysis to say this player is worth more than the market is saying. And I understand that. But in this spot, he is absolutely right. There's a difference between Nick Castellanos not seeing balls inside the zone is because we know that you're going to go chase outside the zone, and that's the way to get you out. If you're going to keep swinging, we're going to keep throwing outside the zone. With Bryce Harper, why would we throw you a strike with Alec Boehm sitting behind you? We know that you could change the game with one swing of the bat. So I again say, why would we throw you a strike? So that's a number that they can absolutely point to. And we all know, you get to October, even in the regular season, it's still Bryce Harper. You can talk about the numbers, but at the end of the day, it's still Bryce Harper.